All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming or for attending, watching. 2 weeks ago, we looked at the Bridge Observational Rating Scale as it relates to reading assessment. And today we are looking at the Bridge for the items specific to writing, as well as the Developmental Writing Scale developed by Janet Stern. So let's get going. In today's webinar, we'll be introducing the items of the Bridge scale that are specific to writing, as well as the developmental writing scale, and hopefully providing you with some new tools for really authentic, dynamic portfolio observational assessment of our students. I mean, these are all just sort of catchwords from the special education field that's really looking at how do we get the most authentic assessment of our students. We have really complicated kids in really complex bodies, and it's very difficult to take most students with Angelman and say, you know, next Thursday at 12 noon we're going to find out what she knows about this specific topic. We never know. For so many of our kids are just simply consistently inconsistent. We don't know from day to day and even sometimes hour to hour what their seizure control is going to be, what their motor planning is like, and just kind of what level of responsiveness they're going to be able to have and how well they're going to be able to organize themselves to show us what they know. And so we use assessment tools that allow us to capture trends over time rather than testing in kind of that high-stakes situation of right now you're going to tell us what you know, and it doesn't really matter what else is going on with your body in this given moment. And what these kind of portfolio assessment tools and observational assessment tools let us do is, besides just looking for trends over time, is it lets us capture those moments of our students at their best, when all the stars aligned and they just had that one day where they were able to show us so much of what they know. And we might not see it again for another 3 months, and then after that we might not see it for another 6 weeks. And so very often when we do more formalized assessment with our students, what we hear parents say and what we hear teachers say is, but I know she knows more than this. I know that this was her score, but let me tell you about this time that, and then they give us these anecdotes. And so in the field of education over the last, you can say, 20 years, we've really developed a nice selection of portfolio and observational assessment tools that allow us to not just ask the student to perform what they know, but really train us to be good observers, capture what they know in a systematic way, and be able to report back on that and how we're going to change our instruction based on what they're showing us they know. So you'll get some examples of what these all look like. And we're also going to talk about how to distinguish between how we teach a skill and how we assess it, because within the Angelman community we've been talking about these tools for the last year or two. And I find that we often confuse the teaching and the testing. And so, you know, for example, let's say we want to know if the student knows the difference between the photos on the page and the text on the page of the book. We might ask the question every day and be looking for a certain percentage of correct responses. That's testing. That's not actually teaching the difference between photos versus print on the page. So we'll have more of a conversation about that and hopefully clarify that a bit. Using Maureen Never's 5 steps framework, we are looking at assessment tools, so kind of testing tools, so the Bridge Observational Rating Scale and the Developmental Writing Scale. And what's really lovely about both of these is that they are in the public domain, they are free, and there's a variety of support tools, particularly for the Bridge, but also within the Developmental Writing Scale. And I didn't really show this in the webinar, but the Developmental Writing Scale is the basis of a writing curriculum and a writing software provided by Don Johnston. So if you have any questions or interest in that, I can post links to that in the Facebook page. So lots of tools to support all of you as educators as you're trying to start using these. So to get started, let's just ask, what is writing? Take a moment and write down or think about what you think of when you think of writing. What is writing? You can raise your hand if you want to offer an answer here. Otherwise, I'm just going to provide my own. And I'll tell you from what I've seen from the research, there's a lot of things that people are thinking of when they're thinking about writing. I think it's more complex, and there's more skills that go into writing than anything else. But fundamentally, at its basis, writing is when we translate an idea from our own heads into text. So we take an idea from our heads and we reduce it to writing. We reduce it to a visual form, a visual symbolic form that can be shared with other people. It's writing if it was our idea, and it's writing if it can be shared over time and over space so that someone in the future can still see what it is I wrote because we've reduced it to that. That's what I mean by reducing it to print. You don't have to be in the exact same room at the exact same time in order to get that message because of the way it was symbolically reduced into some kind of visual form like text. So what is writing not? Writing is not tracing. When I trace, that's a motor skill. Writing is not copying. When I copy, I'm really matching and trying to match what I can write with my hand to what I can see in front of me. It's not scribing. When I share an idea and someone else writes it down, although scribing might be the way that a student who is not yet writing in a recognizable way is able to take ideas from their head and reduce them to that visual form. And so scribing is support that we provide students to help take their ideas and put them into text, but it's not writing by itself. And it's not writing when I say pick from these two or pick from these three. If I provide a closed set of symbols or pictures, I say, what would you like to eat today at lunch? And you choose from 2 or 3 options. That's not writing, because writing is generative. Writing means I've taken an idea from my head, not that I've chosen from the options that are in front of me. Now that's different from using a communication system. When I have a full communication system with a robust vocabulary, like everything we've talked about, and I share an idea and we reduce it to text, then that would be writing. But if it's just that kind of limited thing where I don't actually, if it has to be more than that limited set, it has to be where I actually could share any idea and you didn't necessarily know what my answer was going to be. So let's look at some more of what this could be. Is this writing? Many of our kids with Angelman love this app. It's called Write My Name. They trace their names with it. They love it. They have great fun. Are they writing when they do this? I would say no. They're tracing. They're working on the fine motor skills, but it's a really fun activity. And what I find is that a lot of our kids are really drawn to this. They know what writing looks like. And so when we see kids who really enjoy tracing activities or they really enjoy these kind of apps, they know what writing looks like. It has significance. They know what letters look like. They know what their name looks like, and they're really enjoying the exploration. So this kind of activity is writing exploration. It's letter exploration, it's alphabet exploration, it's not writing. How about when a student uses hand-over-hand support? So an adult is sitting next to the student providing hand-over-hand support so they can trace a highlighted or dashed line version of their name. Are they writing? Again, we would say no. We're providing hand-over-hand support for them to trace. Tracing may or may not be developing the fine motor skills, but again, this is not writing. Now, it's very interesting. Some of our students will trust our motor skills more than theirs. They will take our hands and try to direct our hands. I think they often trust our hands and our bodies more than they're able to trust their own. That is still not writing. But again, if the fundamental concept of writing is that it's generative and I'm taking an idea from my head and I'm reducing it to text, then you're going to see that this fails that. But I'd still prefer that the student directs the hand-over-hand support rather than the adult. So how about this? You are writing a grocery list, you walk away, and your student scribbles with a crayon all over it. Is that writing? May or may not be, right? We don't know yet if that student is conveying an idea from their head and trying to reduce it to print. But this is exactly the kind of behavior that we can observe that develops over time into writing. And when we start to see trends, such as whenever we write, our student wants to come and write on the same page. When we see trends such as the student is writing on paper every chance they get, but they're no longer writing on the walls, the floors, the table, or their sister. Then we start to go, okay, we're really starting to see some developing awareness of what writing is. So we don't necessarily know the first time that they might just be drawing or exploring, all kinds of things they're doing with the crayon on the grocery list. But we're looking for that kind of change over time that tells us this. And if the student can talk and they've scribbled all over the grocery list, we often say to them, oh my gosh, that was my grocery list. What did you do? What did you write? And the student says, oh, I wrote cookies. I want to make sure you remember to get cookies. All right, well then that student was writing. Their scribbling was writing. For our students with Angelman, they've never had that oral language. So it's been much harder for them to convey the meaning behind what they're doing. And so compared to their typical peers, they may very well have been doing much more early writing than we ever guessed because we didn't have a way to ask them what they were doing. And so this is that fundamental connection between writing and communication systems. For our students, we will never know their writing for what it is unless we have a communication system to be able to clarify it, because until their writing is recognizable text, we're not going to be able to recognize it for what it is. So how about this? Your student takes your phone and texts a string of random letters to your supervisor. Is that writing? Again, it may or may not be. It may just be exploration. It may just be imitation of mom. I see mom pick up her phone and push a bunch of things. It may be that cause and effect level of exploration. It may very well be writing. We don't know if the student is trying to convey an idea using text, or if they know what these writing-like behaviors look like, because in modern-day society we do a lot of writing with our thumbs on our cell phones, and that they're just trying to imitate it. But we know that this is exactly the kind of behavior, the exact kind of exploration that leads to writing over time. So this is on the path to writing. How about this? The student scrawls a mark with a pencil on the name line of the sign-in sheet before they see their speech therapist each week. Is that writing? Very well could be. We don't know. We don't know for sure that when we ask the student to write their name that they are cognitively understanding yet, that they are reducing the idea of their name to a written form in order to represent their name with text. But again, this is exactly the kind of behavior that develops over time. This is the kind of observable behavior that we can shape into name writing. And this is the kind of activity that when children have participated in it from the time they were very young, that it develops their concept of what writing is over time. How about if the student stamps her name on the name line of the sign-in sheet before she sees her speech therapist? It's completely recognizable because it's a stamp. Is it writing? We really don't know. We have so many students who have spent so much time stamping their names, and so many school teams who've said, I don't really know that she's made the connection yet between the stamping, which is a motor act, and the fact that she's saying her name. We're not really sure yet. There is no logical progression necessarily from stamping your name to understanding that you're conveying an idea, that you're conveying a representation of your name. So where stamping can be really powerful is students who will never have the motor control to be able to hold a traditional pencil, traditional marker, and they want a way to represent their name and they want it to look correct, right? So if that's who your student is, they know what name writing is, but they don't begin to have that motor skill to be able to access traditional writing tools, then we can provide a stamp, and that's a legally recognizable form of signature in almost any jurisdiction. But we're not necessarily developing writing by starting there. We have very little reason to believe that this actually develops into writing, that the stamp might be the long-term tool that student uses to represent their name, but there's no reason to think that that's actually going to teach writing. How about this? Is this writing? The teacher provides a sentence frame that I'd like to go to all of her students, and each student finishes the sentence. Our student, who is Angelman, uses her AAC to answer Burger King. Maybe we scaffold her by helping with the navigation, going to, for example, places in her system so that she can offer a word to finish the sentence. Is that writing? It's certainly on the way. It's a huge piece of developing language, right? We don't know the correct answer. We don't know what she was thinking of, but if she's got a robust vocabulary of words that she can always use, they aren't what Carolyn Musselwhite calls words from heaven that just sort of float down whenever we want them and then we take them away again. But these are words that are always there, and she's learning how she can take an idea from her head and use her communication system to be able to translate it into print, where all we're doing is actually taking what she communicated with her AAC and putting it into writing. We're on the road to writing. How about this one? One student has Angelman, one is a typical peer. Using the student's AAC, the two students talk about something they both did over the weekend. The peer writes it down. Our student adds to it by typing in a string of letters, AATGF. Maybe she types it on a letterboard or just pushes the letters on a letterboard. Maybe she uses whatever system she has in her communication system to indicate the letters, and the peer scribes that down too. Is this writing? We don't know for sure. We don't know for absolutely sure that the student intentionally, purposefully selected those individual letters to convey that idea, but we know that this is exactly the kind of writing activity and writing exploration that leads to writing over time. This is the kind of instructional activity that provides our students that opportunity to convey their own ideas and see them reduced to print so that they can understand what writing is. So how about this? Is this writing? Sure looks like it. This is a student who knows what writing looks like. This is a student who's making really interesting intentional selections. Notice the different colors. It's very possible that they're conveying different ideas with different colors. We don't know for sure, but if this is a typical student, we can ask them what they wrote and they can use their speech to tell us, and that's how we know it's writing. If it's a student who doesn't have speech, then so often we haven't been able to recognize what they wrote. But this is very much on the road to writing. How about this? This is a drawing. This is a drawing by a student with Angelman, and the context is that she was actually in church and the minister was talking about our Heavenly Father who is over all of us, that we have a family here on earth. And this is an only child, so she has a mother, a father, and herself. And we have our Heavenly Father who's over all of us. She's conveying an idea with a drawing. She's not writing, but this is very much on the road to writing. This is reducing an idea from her head to a visual form. It's just not yet using the symbol set of the alphabet. It's not using text to do it. How about this? If you look really hard, and if you kind of squint, you can tell this is writing. You may not be able to recognize any words. If you look carefully, you'll see Mom and Mia, but you won't necessarily see any other recognizable words. This is a student who knows what writing looks like. She knows that writing is when we convey ideas from our heads. She knows that specific letters convey specific important ideas, and it's not surprising that her own name and her mom's name are the only two recognizable words that come across. When I asked her what she wrote, she said that she knows how to write, but she can't read yet. So really, really interesting. She knows what writing looks like. She couldn't tell me what she had written. But this is exactly the kind of exploration that leads to writing over time. How about this? So this is one of our students with Angelman, and this is clearly writing. You can see writing at the top of her page because we can see how she's distinguishing between writing and drawing. So she has a drawing where she's conveying her ideas using visual images, and then she has writing where she's using letter-like shapes. We can't read it, There may be no intentional selection of which letters. These may be the only letters that she's able to form right now, but that's fine. This is writing. We are really solidly on the road to writing. How about this? This girl absolutely loved this kind of activity. So what she would do is choose a picture. Her mom would type out the word, and the daughter would try to replicate it. It looks like writing. No matter how we look at it, it certainly looks like writing. This is a gorgeous matching exercise. She really enjoyed doing it. She was learning, I think, a lot about the letters because she was the one choosing what she wanted her mom to write about. She knows that certain letters represent specific things, but this isn't writing. This is a copying activity, and it can be a great deal of fun, but it's not writing. So how about this? What you can see on this page is a collage of photos of an activity that our student with Angelman did with a friend. And then using a letter board, she selected letters. Her mom scribed them for her. And then they talked about them so that we could understand what it was that Emma was trying to say in her writing. And Emma was able to indicate that KGPGG for game, WACC stood for watch, and AA stood for Anna. And then she didn't have an explanation for what those last letters were. This is early writing. This is a student who selected some photos to represent an idea, used the photos as a support, while she generated text to share that idea. It's not yet completely recognizable, but we're on our way to conventional writing where anyone who is literate in her language can understand the message that she's trying to convey. How about this? This was a student at an Angelman summer camp. We had engaged in a whole bunch of activities. We were now writing about the activities. We asked the student to choose what it was she had most enjoyed that she wanted to write about. She had indicated beach. And then we used partner-assisted scanning where she had these letters to choose from. Do you want one of these letters? Is it A, B, C, or D? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next set. Is it E, F, G, or it's one of these? Okay, which letter do you want? And we selected them that way. Is this writing? It's absolutely writing. She is selecting letters to convey an idea. It would have been better writing if we had used her own communication system to be able to generate the topics that we were writing about. She did not yet have a system that she had good access to, and so we had sort of selected from photos what our topics were. And so we can't be sure that it's solid writing because she didn't have a communication system to clarify her message. She didn't get to develop her message sharing any idea that was in her head. Instead, she was really stuck selecting from what we thought was the most likely thing that she wanted to write about. So our next step for this student would be to make sure that she has a really comprehensive system where we can talk about her topic. We know that she's chosen the topic she wants to write about. She hasn't just settled for something that we offered and then go from there. But this is definitely on the road to writing. How about this? It's definitely recognizable. Is this writing? And I think I've already given the answer away, but no, this is tracing. You can trace something, just like you can trace a shape. You can trace a name without having any cognitive idea that the shapes that you're tracing are actually letters and that the letters come together in a specific pattern to form your name. You could trace a complete sentence, and now what you're doing is you're forming the letters that express someone else's idea. Right? Whatever other idea someone else was trying to convey when they wrote the sentence, you're now tracing over it. But it's not your idea, and you're not reducing it to text. You're just copying. So how about this? This is a worksheet from Maggie's classroom. And for every worksheet, Maggie is always asked to sign her name. And then once she has made whatever mark she's going to make, her educational assistant says, great, here's how I write your name, and writes it afterwards. Maggie's M has actually developed quite a bit from here, but this was one of her most kind of her earliest really recognizable letters. And I would say, yes, this is writing. Maggie has clearly learned that for example, if there's a sheet of paper and there's a line at the top, that's where her M is supposed to go. She's learned that if there's a list of lines and everybody's writing their name on a different line, then her M is supposed to go there instead. So she knows the difference, for example, between where she's supposed to write to check out a library book or to sign in versus signing on a worksheet. It isn't necessarily more recognizable than this yet, and M is the only letter that she can form yet that's recognizable, but yes, this is writing. And lastly, how about this? So this is a student, he doesn't speak English, but this is a student who's using his pod book with his mom. It's shared writing activities. So they decide on an idea together. He uses his pod to talk with her about what it is they're going to write about. He selects words from his pod book. She is the one who reduces them to writing. You can see that he stamped his name on the cover of the book. Is this writing? And I would say absolutely. And more, the more time I spend with our kids, the more time I spend with our families and in their classrooms, the more I think that this is really the foundation of writing, because by using the communication system, we are really ensuring that we're getting the students' ideas out. And then we're making sure that they have access to the alphabet to clarify their ideas and to be part of that process of reducing their writings to text. But first we have to reduce their ideas to words, and that's how we're using their communication systems. So this is 100% on the road to writing, and this is just a gorgeous example. All right, so let's go a little further into now how we would assess writing development. I shared this same handout 2 weeks ago. This is from Gretchen Hanser, published by the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies. And she talks about important concepts of emergent writing, that it's so much more than letter identification or spelling. I know it's IEP season right now. I'm getting lots of messages from folks who are trying to write IEP goals. They're trying to figure out what is their student's baseline and what is the goal for learning. And so often it's activities like letter identification and using flashcards and that kind of stuff. Can the student tell us that they know their letters? And what you really see from this handout, I think we can upload this to the Facebook page, is that the last most important concept of emergent writing is the alphabetic principle, knowing that every letter has its own name and that you know its name, and that every letter has its own sound and you can identify its sound. So you can say that A is for apple as A. That's the last step. All the steps that come before that is learning that print has meaning and that there's a difference between print and pictures, that print is connected to what we say and that we can reduce what we say to print, and that when we do that, we read the print, we don't read the photo or the picture or the illustration. That print serves a purpose. We're always using it for something, and it's something that everyone does, and honestly it's something that we want to do too. So the kid who sees you write a list and then they go over and scribble over it, they're telling us they know that print has a purpose, that everyone does it, and they want to do it too. They're learning the tools that we use to generate print, so such as a pencil, a keyboard, all of that kind of thing. They're learning that something every time we write, that we write for lots of different reasons, that we use print to share information and to share ideas, that they're realizing that the ideas in their head can be reduced to print and therefore shared with others. And then they're also learning that there's an alphabet, which is, you know, this distinct finite group of letters, and that we group individual letters to make words, and that we can arrange and rearrange letters to make different words. And then we learn that letters have names and letters make sounds. So as you're thinking about where your student is at in their writing development, before we focus on things like letter identification, these are all of the other really important understandings that we need to develop. And our job as parents and as teachers is to remove some of these barriers, because our students, because of their motor disabilities, because of their motor planning issues, they haven't been able to pick up writing tools and explore them in the same way. If they were able to pick up writing tools, they couldn't form things that were clearly meaningful, and therefore they didn't receive the same feedback that their typical peers would have received when we commented on their writing and their drawing. We may have often missed the intent behind what they were doing. And our job is to remove barriers, because if our students couldn't easily form letters, form words, access the alphabet, then they won't have had the same opportunities to experience exploration, to just explore the alphabet and writing and get an idea of how they can share their ideas. So that's our job, and as we're assessing where they're at, it's so we can develop instruction that makes sure that we're moving them along that road to writing. So 2 weeks ago, we looked at the bridge assessment. We looked at the scales more specific to language and reading, and today we're looking at their scales for writing. You can get a copy of the bridge assessment for free off the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies website, as well as guides to help you administer it, such as the PowerPoint presentation that's listed here, where you can see an example of which each item on each scale looks like, if you're just trying to develop kind of more reliability for how you assess them. The bridge was published in Young Exceptional Children, and there's an explanation here in terms of how it was validated and how it's used. So it's a peer-reviewed tool, and the actual scales look something like this. And so it's divided up into foundations of reading, foundations of writing, and others. And today we're only going to cover the 4 items that are specific to the foundations of writing. So the first scale asks, how does the student currently draw or write? Are they exploring writing tools? Are they now beginning to explore tools with beginning purpose? So for example, if I pick up a crayon and I eat it, then I'm exploring the tool. I'm exploring it because I know it exists. But if I'm actually trying to use it the way it's intended to be used, then I understand the drawing tool's specific purpose. And so if I start to make a mark on the page, we're seeing beginning purpose. We see developing purpose as I learn to make more intentional marks. And then we start to see that over time, the student's writing looks different from drawing and looks more writing-like. And here's some examples of students with Angelman whose writing is developing along this progression. So we see on the left-hand side of the screen, a student who's at this point able to make some marks across the page. Very interesting to see them so linear. That might be actually a result of his motor delays, but it may be a reflection of his knowledge that text is something that moves from left to right across the page. And then we see a student who has really unusually strong motor skills for one of our kids with Angelman, and she's able to draw pictures that are very clearly different from her text. What was so interesting with this student is that she could write all day long, and what she writes is incredibly detailed. But without a strong foundation in a communication system, where she knew her communication system so well, and it was so widely used throughout her school and throughout her life, she wasn't able at this point to tell us what it was she was drawing. And we couldn't get enough information from her drawings to be able to conclude. So this writing stage, and this drawing stage, where kids are understanding the difference between drawing and writing, for them to actually share the meaning behind what they're doing, they need access to language to be able to speak it out, because they don't have the conventional writing skills yet to be able to write down what the purpose of this illustration is. And again, that tells us why that communication system is so essential and why that access to language is really the foundation behind access to writing. And then students begin to use specific letters, be able to select specific letters to convey specific meanings. Next, the bridge asked, how does the student use print? So we first looked at how they're drawing and writing, but now how are they printing? Do they use symbols to communicate? Can they generate a drawing to communicate meaning? And you can see, again, our students' communication systems, that access to language is the foundation for everything that follows with writing. Now we ask, can the student use scribbles or drawings to make a sign, to label things, or to write a list? And in these cases, it may not look like writing. But a student who is verbal can make something that sure looks like a list. And I know when my younger girl was little, she did all kinds of things that sure kind of looked like writing if I wasn't wearing my glasses, but she could tell me what it was. She knew that it was a list of all of her stuffed animals or all of her Barbie dolls, that kind of stuff. Is the student able to actually generate a letter, to create a message, to write a list? And now are they starting to use letter-like forms, maybe in Scribble, to tell a story, to create a message? If we go back, and look at Emma, this illustration here in the middle. We can see she's using drawings combined with letter-like forms to tell a story. Now she needs access to language. That's where her AAC comes in, is access to language to be able to tell us what it is that she was doing there. So here's sort of the development of how students learn to use print, and here's some examples. It's actually quite rare. I've not found very many examples of our students with Angelman who are able to generate a drawing to communicate meaning, but many of our students are able to find photos from their camera rolls, to take photos, to find videos and that kind of thing to be able to communicate meaning. So we're going to make sure they have access to a communication system, and we're going to use it broadly to develop their language, and then we're going to provide them as many visual supports as we can. So we're going to scaffold that by providing them visuals that can help communicate meaning and help give context to what they're doing. We have many students with really advanced skills who are creating letter-like forms, but often they're not writing letters. Often they're not creating messages. They're using their communication systems to request a sandwich to be prepared exactly the way they like it, but they're not actually making lists. They're not sending text messages. They're not retelling stories, that sort of thing. And so that's, again, where even what they're doing with writing is being held up by their access to language. Here's an example of, this was just a worksheet in Maggie's school, in Maggie's class, where all of the students were essentially writing a summary of 2 different books. And what Maggie was asked to do was to use her communication system to describe the emotions of the character in very specific scenes. So this is the start of writing. Now, she couldn't get the part of translating it to text, but we're asking her to generate the idea, and then her educational assistant was trying to translate that to text. And to me, the ideal situation would be, okay, now that we've done this, now that we've gotten as much as we can out of your communication system, here's the alphabet. What would you like to add now using the alphabet? And I think that that would have kind of made this perfect. So how do we teach this? How do we teach these 2 things in terms of how to teach students to use print and how to teach students to draw and write to convey meaning? We know that it's absolutely essential for our kids to have daily models of writing. We need to write for them. We need to write, we use regular pencils, they see regular pencils, they see keyboards all the time, but they need to see examples of writing using a tool they can one day access, even if they can't access it right now, just to make sure that they understand that writing isn't just something that everybody else does, but it's something that they do. So the more that they see their communication system used to create lists, to send messages, right? A whole bunch of different apps on the iPad, for example, communication apps, can also post a status update, can also post something to Twitter, can also send a text message or send an email. So you can take whatever the student said with their communication system and now send it over to their email system. We need to be doing that with their system. That's how we're going to teach this, and we're going to give them lots of opportunities to do it too. We're going to do lots of that kind of structured, shared writing experiences, such as journaling, which we had a webinar earlier, things like predictable chart writing. We're going to teach this by, if it's us parents at home, using the student's communication system to do some of our writing. So, for example, taking Maggie's Proloquo, making the grocery list based on what's in it, and then using the alphabet to add anything to the list that's not. Because, you know, certainly some of her most common foods like eggs and avocado are in her Proloquo, but I honestly wouldn't know where to find coconut oil in it. So that's where I'm going to need to use the alphabet, either if it's in her AAC or in using a different alternative pencil to be able to add something like coconut oil to my grocery list. The more that she sees her system and that I use think alouds about how I'm using her system, the more that when I go to send a text message to my husband to say, hey, make sure you pick up coconut oil, that I use a think aloud about, oh, I need to send a message to Daddy. What do I need to say? How am I going to do it? What letters am I going to choose? I'm going to type D, and watch how my text message app actually prompts me, gives me different options of people I can send it to whose name starts with D, and I'm going to look for, you know, daddy, or however you're going to do this, that kind of thing. So these are all think alouds. Using our iPads or our phones that we've just been at the zoo and something fun has happened, I want to tell grandma about this cool thing that happened. I'm going to select this photo so she can see what it is. Now, what am I going to say about this photo? Can I use your AAC system? Am I going to use my alphabet? How am I going to decide what I write? But making that visible. For our students with Angelman, we have to make our use of language really visible, and we have to make it accessible. So the think aloud is part of what makes it visible. Just making sure that we're not just sending that text message with the photo to grandma, but we're making sure that our student can observe us, can witness it, can see us doing it. The last writing item in the bridge looks at how does the student write their name. And you'll notice that nowhere in here does it say that the student traces their name as part of a developmental trajectory to being able to write it. First, students make a completely inconsistent mark or scribble to represent their name. And then we see developing consistency. So for example, Maggie's original M's looked more like just a sort of a hump, and then almost a hump like with two flower petal kind of things, because she simply couldn't do that up, down, up, down. And you can see what the M looks like here down on the left side page. So for a while, this was the very consistent form. This is what she could do. It became very letter-like. You could see it developing in its kind of letter-like qualities, and it became more recognizable. We haven't yet figured out another letter that's in her name that she can form. So right now, it's been about 2 years, and right now that first letter is the only letter she can form, but we can really see how it's progressing over time. For some of our kids, depending on their motor abilities, they may never be able to write their full name in recognizable form. They may never be able to write their first name and last name together in any kind of recognizable form. And that's really okay, because to me, when I think about what matters about this scale on the bridge in terms of how does the student write their name, the real question is how are they cognitively able to represent their name? And can we develop that cognitive understanding of what it means? When I put my name on an assignment, I'm claiming ownership over my own work. When I write my name to check out a library book, I'm claiming responsibility for this book. It's being trusted to me, and I'm claiming responsibility. When I sign a permission form, I'm entering into a contract. And that cognitive understanding and being able to represent my name in order to participate in those activities matters far more than it being completely recognizable. No one would ever be able to look at my signature and be able to recognize that it actually says Erin Sheldon, and that's okay. It's still kind of legally binding. So that's really the goal that I would have for our kids when it comes to name writing. And we are going to teach this by inviting kids to sign their name at every opportunity, to sign cards, notes, invitations, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Valentine's, whether it's Mother's Day, whatever opportunity there is, sign their names. It doesn't have to be recognizable because nobody's ever actually enforced that mine signature has to be recognizable, so their names don't have to be either. But we're really making sure that we're inviting them to participate in that opportunity to represent their name. We're going to sign in at school at every opportunity. We're going to sign out whenever we're taking responsibility for things like library books and equipment. And whatever the student writes, we'll follow it with a model of how we write their name so that they can keep working on how to generate that representation of what their name looks like, and they can keep seeing a model afterwards of what it looks like. We're not providing them a model to copy because we're not testing their copying skills. We want to see if they can generate and then reproduce that image and text of what their name looks like. So what the bridge skills really let us do is assess the students' literacy and language development over time. Really be able to describe how they're accessing language in a whole bunch of different areas of literacy to be able to figure out where their baseline is and where we want to go. The developmental writing scale is the next tool I want to show you, and what it does is provide us a really discrete way to score writing samples over time so that we can really measure how much more sophisticated the student is becoming in their writing understandings. I'm only going to show you the first 7 levels of the developmental writing scale because it goes all the way from the earliest levels of writing to being able to write multi-paragraph pages and reports and that kind of thing. And so for our students who are emergent, this is emergent level assessment, and I'm just focusing you on the ones that you're most likely to encounter with our students with Angelman. The first level of the developmental writing scale, and if you simply Google the developmental writing scale, it's been posted free online, I think on academia.com. I can upload it to the Facebook group, but it's a peer-reviewed, tested, validated tool, so feel confident using it. And the first level looks at drawing. So is the student using lines and curves in a way that appear to represent objects? And what's unique about the developmental writing scale is we first describe what typical drawing development looks like for students who don't have disabilities, and then we talk about how we would accommodate that for students who do have disabilities. So for students who don't have disabilities, they're using lines and curves in a way that they appear to represent objects. And then we start to see these continuous lines, these vertical or circular or wavy lines, that when they're actually going from drawing to scribbling, you see that it's very linear across the page. They understand that writing isn't something where letters pop up in random places all over the page. And then slowly we see students begin to generate strings of letters. And there may be no intention behind which letter they're selecting, but they know that to convey a message, you do it with letters, and they just generate a whole bunch of letters. Often it's the same letter repeated, or we're seeing certain patterns of letters, or students often have their favorite letters and they use those letters a lot. And then we see that students begin to understand that the English language isn't filled up with, strings of 25 letters all in a row, but they're actually broken up into groups. And so we see these like word-like groupings. We see students start to insert spaces. And if you're squinting or not wearing your glasses, it kind of looks like writing. And those are students who know what the English language looks like. They've seen lots of examples of it. They don't know how to select which letters to represent which words or sounds, but they know what writing looks like. And then as their phonological awareness develops, we start to see the emergence of intelligible words where they're actually intentionally selecting letters that can be that can represent specific sounds in words that they know, and that's where you start to see that early phonetic spellings. And you'll see lots of examples here. Slowly we're going to see the emergence of 2 or 3 intelligible words, and I'm going to give you some ideas of what we've seen in our students with Angelman. So even this first stage of lines and curves that appear to represent objects, this is often very difficult for our students. Here's an example from a student with Angelman, clearly using lines and curves to represent an idea, to represent objects, but it's not, that's not a typical level of motor control. So the way that we test this with students with Angelman and other nonverbal students is we want to know, can you tell me from these 2 pages which page I'm going to read? Where do I start reading? And the student who selects the words rather than the pictures is the student who understands that words represent text. And I think this has been misunderstood a bit in our community, with the idea being that if a student simply selects a photo, because if we go back to the developmental writing scale, we see that under level 1 drawing, if the student selects a picture, that's an accommodation. But we really need to know, for it to be a level 1, we need to know that the student understands that words convey print, not the photo. And if a student can generate strings and strings of letters, but they actually can't tell us which of these 2 pages we would read from, then they're still a level 1 no matter how many letters they're generating. How do we teach this? We're going to do lots of think alouds during shared reading. We're going to talk about the page. We're going to talk about, here's the picture. Oh, that's a really cute baby. That's my daughter Maggie, by the way. That was her at 6 weeks old. We had just thrown her up into the air. Oh, what a big smile. Now let's see what the words say. And we might touch the words while we're talking about them. We might drag our finger across the sentence as we're reading it to help really draw their attention to it and help them develop that kind of one-to-one correspondence of, I'm speaking a word that I'm looking at in the text, and that's how I know which word to say next. So there's various ways we can highlight text while reading. There's lots of storybook apps that highlight text while reading, and that helps develop that awareness. We're going to use the words that we need for reading and writing. We're going to use words like page and picture and word and sentence so that our students start to develop that concept knowledge of what those things are. And this might seem counterintuitive, but we're going to read things like wordless picture books because that allows us to just generate language about what's on the page and then notice the difference when we have words in the text as well. So for it to be level 2 on the developmental writing scale, then again, we need to see continuous lines arranged linearly across the page. It might look like this. For some of our students with Angelman, they may never be able to generate anything that looks like that. We're not going to belabor it. This isn't level 2 on the developmental writing scale is not an essential one. Level 1 is absolutely essential to be able to know if students are now progressing beyond that to understanding what text is, but level 2 is not. However, other things that we're going to do is provide lots of opportunity for students to use lots of different tools for drawing and scribbling and see if we can begin to develop that distinction between what is drawing and what is writing, what is drawing and what is scribbling, like you saw in the drawings from Emma earlier. We're going to invite students to generate text and then illustrate it. So such as selecting photos or selecting emoticons, or we're going to select those to be our illustration, and now we're going to write about the photo or the drawing or the emoticon or whatever we're doing. So we're going to make sure that students understand that these are 2 different things that supplement each other, but they're still different from each other. Once we know that a student knows what text is and that the text is what conveys the meaning, when they then are playing with your cell phone and generating strings of text and maybe sending really embarrassing texts and emails to your supervisors and colleagues and academics who you've reached out to for support, not that that's ever happened to me, but once they start doing this kind of thing, now we know that they're at level 3 on the developmental writing scale. They know that writing is something that we generate with letters, and they are looking to generate strings of letters. Again, to understand what our students are writing about, that's where their communication system comes in. And it's not enough to say, select a photo and now write about it. We really need to be using their system to make sure they have access to language, that they're generating their ideas into language before they're getting generated into print. So for our students, it's more complicated than just taking an idea from their head and putting it into print. It's taking an idea from their head, making sure it's in the language they have, it's in language, and then reducing it to print. So we need those AAC systems. That's where that comes in, to really understand what idea you had in mind. Otherwise, this kind of letter generation might just be a really fun cause and effect activity of just selecting letters to see how quick the screen can fill up. But we really want to know the idea behind what the student is generating. So on the developmental writing scale level 3, we see those strings of letters. They're not yet grouped into words. We don't know that the letter selection is very intentional. We don't see spacing yet. And for some of these, again, it may very well depend on context. Some of the examples I'm providing you, you might look at them and decide that they're a different level on the developmental writing scale. And what that tells you is how context matters. So this, for example, is where it looks like a completely random strings of letters, where Maggie chose lots of E's, R's, and T's to in this kind of scribbling activity, but it might make a difference to know that the topic she was writing about was Ruby Bridges. And when you think about the sounds we hear in the name Ruby, she got lots of R's and lots of E's, and that's really interesting. So once we have lots and lots of writing samples from her, then we have lots of information about how she's doing. So again, strings of letters not grouped into words. This would be level 3 on the developmental writing scale. Then we start to see word-like groupings. We start to see attention to spacing, the idea that we convey one idea and then we need a space before we try to convey more. And then we see strings of letters with one possible real word. This might look completely random, but again, context matters. Maggie selected a photo of what she was going to write about. It was her friend Maisie, and this is what she typed. So once we start to see real words, recognizable words, that's a level 5. When we start to see 2 to 3 intelligible words within a string of text, interestingly, students might have one recognizable word here, and they might have more attention to letter spacing, but then as they develop up to level 5 and 6, we actually might see that attention to letter spacing disappear as they start to focus now on more intentional letter selection. So where we see Mom and Mia, we see virtually no attention to spacing. Where we see Emma's message about watching the game with Anna, we see no attention to letter spacing, but we see the beginning of recognizable words. So to be able to use these scales effectively, we have to keep all writing samples. I think that's the #1 rule of effective data collection and monitoring of what our students are learning. Keep all of them, because these tools will allow you to see progress over time. They'll allow you to see what happens when your student uses different tools. Something, just an easy mistake that I've seen some teams make is to simply take screenshots of everything, but if we don't know what tool, so if we don't know, for example, whether the student was using a full QWERTY keyboard, if they were using an alphabet flip chart style where they just had a limited number of letters per screen and they had to swipe to access the whole alphabet. We don't know if they had, for example, a full QWERTY keyboard with everything, all the punctuation marks, all the numbers and everything else, versus if they had a QWERTY keyboard that only had the letters. You really need to know what kind of tool was used to be able to assess those so that you can compare like to like. So just know that. Keep data on refusals. If students refuse to participate in writing activities, keep doing them. Keep data on refusals, because I think the first level of development that we see in our kids is when they go from refusal to participation. Once they start to see that this is meaningful, this is real, this isn't just something I'm supposed to do to please somebody else, but this is actually real, this is my idea, this is really valued, then we see them participating a lot more. And so your very first writing goal might actually be just engagement. We can set goals and collect data on how long the student is attending, on what specific behaviors we saw, such as just sort of our best guess of how intentional they were as they were selecting letters or really selecting messages. For some of our students, when we use their communication system first to try to select the message and then they write more about it afterwards with the alphabet, they might have used up all their energy the first time just with the communication system. We might need to take a break before we now ask them to also use the alphabet. We can measure their level of participation and their level of engagement in ways such as setting goals that will be able to use fewer gestural prompts or verbal prompts, that the student will independently participate in the activity. We can set goals around their level of engagement, that in the beginning when we're just writing for them, really we're just hoping that they'll become aware. We're writing for them so they become aware of what writing is, and then we're actually expecting some kind of response, and that might be when we see the refusal rather than engagement. But then we're going to work through that as they better understand why it's meaningful. We're going to see them start initiating it. I remember when we really saw that Maggie had adopted writing, that she knew she was a writer, was she's still at that stage. You cannot have pens or markers or paper around without her going over and picking them up and just drawing her heart's delight. So where she really understood what the tools are and that she wants to use them. Now, we have to really focus on how she's going to use language to share what she's doing, because what she adopted was what she sees the most of, which is people picking up traditional pens and pencils and writing on paper. Because she didn't have so many models of using a communication system to generate text, of using an alternative keyboard to generate text, that's not her default of what she considers writing to be, so we're still working on that. Possible next steps. I would say my number one next step is that when in doubt about when to use the alphabet versus try to convey a message with a communication system, default to the communication system. There are too many of us who we've seen all this information on writing, and we get so caught up in giving our kids access to the symbol set of the alphabet that our kids then end up plateauing because they don't actually yet have the skills to convey the same messages with their communication systems. And their writing is absolutely held back by what they can convey using their communication system. And the examples I showed of Emma, a really good example of a girl who obviously has a rich imagination. She's trying to convey messages every day using letters, using drawings, but she isn't yet able to convey those same ideas with a communication system. So when in doubt, use AAC. Use the tools of the bridge and the developmental writing scale to be able to describe your student's baseline. And this will help you avoid language in the IEP or language in goals that says that the student isn't yet ready for these kind of writing activities, because now you can demonstrate exactly what they're doing and better identify what your next step is going to be. And focus on how you're going to develop some kind of data collection system. So it can be really simple. It can just be a binder where you're putting all their writing samples in, and maybe you're putting them in different sections based on what tool was used to generate that writing, or you're just going to put a sticky note on it to talk about whatever context people need to know about that writing sample. And then by all means, we really encourage you to share in the Facebook group so that we can hear what's working, what's not, and go from there. So while you think about any questions you might have, let me just say that the ASF Communication Training Series is made available by the Angelman Syndrome Foundation through a generous grant from the Foster Family Charitable Foundation in California. So that's what brought this to you, and hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, I am ready.
Okay, we do have one question. Let me expand it here so I can read it. Our daughter, who is age 16, does not seem interested at all in picking up a pencil, crayon, etc. What should we do?
Then chances are there's a few things. She's probably seen lots and lots of models of how other people use pencils, crayons, etc. Chances are the issue is her motor control, or it's her sensory defensiveness, it's her tactile defensiveness, that either she doesn't trust her hand to be able to represent anything that's in her head, or her hands simply can't bear the texture of holding writing utensils. So I would focus on writing using her communication system and writing using keyboards, that kind of thing. So show her that writing is something we can do with a paper and pencil. She probably already knows that, but maybe she doesn't realize that writing is also something she can do with her communication system. From all the families I've worked with, I would say kind of the easiest way to get started is think about the writing that you already do. You probably already write a grocery list on a pretty regular basis. So how can you make that writing accessible to her? You can use her communication system, go into her food pages, brainstorm what it is you want to pick up at the grocery store, and then write what you see from her communication system. So if we need noodles, if we need cheese, if we need pears, whatever it is we're picking picking up. We can look for them in her system, and then you can write it out. You can, depending on what you're using for a communication system, you might be able to select the foods that you want at the grocery store so they show up in the message bar. Like in Proloquo, it can show up in the message bar, and then you can actually copy and paste that. You can export that and use that as your list. But start using writing tools that she can definitely access. And don't be surprised if you have to do it for quite a while before she really picks up on this, because she's had 16 years of watching other people writing without realizing this is something she can be part of. She's probably checked out from it. So she just needs, I think, a lot of models so that she understands this is something that she can participate in. Another way to work on writing is the people pages in her communication system. Whatever she has, if the people she cares about are in some kind of folder or category in her system, what are the messages that we want to share with them, right? Who is she missing right now? Maybe she has siblings who are away, or grandparents, or old caregivers, or friends. We can talk about the people we see in the communication system, and then we can send them a note. And sometimes we generate that note right in their communication system, and other times we'll generate that note by saying, let's say we find an old friend from school last year. They're still in her system. What's something we want to say to them? You know, I want to see you, I like you, I miss you. We decide what that message is. In the beginning, she may not participate at all. In the beginning, you might be sitting there going, well, I think you really miss this person. You sure liked him a lot. You seemed actually really sad ever since he wasn't in the class. I think you want to say this. And start providing that opportunity for her to at least look at you like you're crazy, or look at you like, oh, yeah, actually, I do. And then figure out how to actually send that message, right? Maybe it's as simple as just sending a text home, sending a text to dad at work. If you're at school, sending a message home to school. I mean, I think one of the most helpful things that school teams can do is at the end of the school day, model in front of our child using their system what we did today. Chances are they're already writing some kind of communication home about something that happened at school. Model it with our child's communication system and send that as the message, so that our kids get an example of really kind of a form of storytelling, I would hope, about something that happened. Invite our kids to participate. Choose photos that we took on their iPad to illustrate the message that we're sending about what special thing we did. The more we get our kids to participate, the more that they can select what topic we're going to write about. So maybe, what are we going to tell mom and dad about what happened at school today? Oh, should it be music, or should it be gym, or should it be recess, or should it be history? Having them be able to choose that picture and help generate that message. So those are the kinds of things I would be doing, making sure that we're figuring out a way to do this in front of her. And to get started, I would think about writing you're already doing and figure out if you can do that writing you're already doing using her tools in some way. So if you're already nagging your husband with some kind of list of to-dos, then can you nag him using the communication system?